Welcome back to the Business That Matters Spotlight. I'm your host, Warren Coughlin, and I'm glad to have you back. I'm very excited about today's guest. This season, we're doing a couple of things different than what we did previously. In the first season, it was all around just the entrepreneurs and their stories, and you could learn from their particular experiences. This year, we're bringing both entrepreneurs to tell those stories, as well as experts who serve them, so that you can learn some insights from the people who serve entrepreneurs and have seen some of the mistakes and some of the successes they've had. And today, we'll have more like today, where there are a combination of the two, someone who's both an entrepreneur who started their business, but also serves entrepreneurs. I'm really excited to welcome Carrie Thomas of Nimbus HR. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
So let's just start in. Tell me just a little bit about Nimbus HR. Who do you serve? How long has it been around? That kind of thing.
So I started Nimbus in 2015, and I will maybe back up to my raison d'etre. And so I worked at large companies, small companies, banks, insurance. I worked at BlackBerry during its big upswing, during its big downturn. So I've been there, done that, seen it. And I wanted to put the power of a full service HR department into the hands of a small to mid-sized business owner. And so that's why I started Nimbus. And I started Nimbus in 2015. I also wanted to spend time with people where it did make a difference and it did matter. And the things that I was doing impacted their business and their lives.
So when you say the power of a big operate, what does that mean? Like, what's the breadth of services that you provide that they may not otherwise get to?
Sure.
Access?
So we literally do full service HR. So when I say the power of a full service HR department, when you're in a larger company, you have a compensation expert, you have a recruiting and talent acquisition expert, you have legal counsel, you have benefits. Those are just, and then you have training. Those are sort of the big bucket items. And so we do all of those things. So I've done, compensation. I have a compensation expert where, if there's something a little bit more tricky and I need access to surveys, compensation surveys, global too, by the way, then I can pull on my consultant for that. I have legal counsel that was head legal counsel for on the employment side at BlackBerry, and we partner as well. So I've held global roles in HR, but if there's a situation where we need a little bit of extra legal attention or eyes on it, I will engage my lawyer. And most of the time we pass on those savings to our clients. We don't charge them. There's only specific situations where they may need more legal counsel, and he has a preferred rate for our clients. We have a benefits consultant, and I chose the benefit consultant I work with specifically because he has actuaries on staff. And when we go to market to look at like a Manulife or a Sun Life or a big benefits provider, we want to make sure that we get the absolute best pricing, that we are designing a benefits plan that works for the business and their budget. And then on the recruiting side, in a larger organization, they have the room to make a recruiting mistake. And in a small to mid-sized business, they don't. So we need to make sure that we bring in the right person at the right time within your budget. And we have a whole bunch of things that we do in there. I headhunted in my past life too. And, when I was at BlackBerry, we hired 153 people in one location in Raleigh, North Carolina in one day.
Wow.
So I literally also had to go do organizational design before we could put the offer letters together with that. And I literally did it by having a stack of resumes and Post-its. So we could design the organization and then I could go away and create the 153 offer letters.
Holy smokes. So, well, let me ask that. What made you want to make that shift? Like, that sounds, those big organizational challenges are exciting and big, and there's budgets behind it, and you've got resources, and now you're going into an environment where it's, much smaller than that without all those resources. What made you make that shift?
I guess it started with thinking, if I can do all of this in a large company, why can't I put together a model where we can do this for a small to mid-sized business? Because they're the ones that need it the most.
Mm-hmm.
The large companies had people design and develop stuff in the 90s that could still probably in some ways work. But for a small to mid-sized business owner or somebody who's just starting, they don't know what they don't know. So if they can hire an expert, We do payroll too. So we really do full soup to nuts of everything. Because my other my other, modus operandi for starting Nimbus too was that a lot of small businesses that I would hear of would get into trouble with the Ministry of Labor, or they would have lawsuits, or they would just have problems with the CRA, WSIB, and they say, how do I handle these things? And when we get in there, we spend a lot of time in the beginning setting up compliance. And for me, what compliance means is if the Ministry of Labor showed up on your doorstep today, are they going to go check, 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 you got a gold star, sorry to bother you? Or are they going to say, here's a fine, here's a fine, here's a fine? And all the things we put in place, whether it's policies, employment contracts, the required training you need to be compliant as well, because there's obligations there too. We put all of these, payroll, we put all of those things in place first so that we know that if they show up, there's risk that's mitigated. And all of the things I do, and one of the reasons why I partnered with my lawyer to begin with is I don't go anywhere to lose. If my clients get, I actually had a client recently. I got a new client in November because they found me, they reached out. Ministry of Labor slapped them with over $15,000 in fines. And it was over a bad employee that they had not managed. And so I wrote the appeal to the Ministry of Labor. I had all hands on deck of my team to quickly close all the gaps for that business. So when we had a mediation with the Ministry of Labor, we won, and that $15,000 in fines went away.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it was.
So when you made
faith.
this jump, like this is a cool story. So when you jumped from, the big brands into your own business, that must have been a bit of a sphincter tightening exercise. Like what, that's a big leap. Like what were your biggest fears about jumping out on your own like that?
That's a great question. Because it's terrifying. Can I do it? Am I going to make money? How am I going to feed myself and pay my mortgage? What will customers think? Does my model work? Does my pricing work? And I guess I do have ADHD, so I have a leap of faith problem. I just continuously take leaps of faith, and I'll figure it out. Because I also am resilient and resourceful. So I think our model has proven itself, and our pricing actually I know has proven itself as well. So to be on target and appropriate for what a small to mid-sized business owner could pay, and we've based it on service levels. So, but make no mistake, it was absolutely, as you say, sphincter tightening. And it was terrifying. But I guess I was at a point too with when I left my last company, I was taking some time, and I thought about the things that were really important to me. And the things that are really important to me and what motivates me the most is helping other people. Mm-hmm. And I could help more people by getting out to small to mid-sized businesses. In a bigger organization that has, 30,000 employees, then I have to look for impacting one person's life at a time. Right. So
that's funny. That's very similar to my philosophy too. I really believe that entrepreneurship is one of the most powerful forces for positive social change. And when you get into a small organization and transform it, the impact is really palpable and really immediate and quite emotional too.
It's profound. It's profound.
Now, you said something, if you're comfortable diving into it a little bit, just because of your own experience and entrepreneurs, ADHD is actually overrepresented among entrepreneurs than the general population. It is. It's really interesting.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Have you seen that in the clients you serve? And does it give you kind of an empathy? Like your own experience, does it help you understand their experience, or does it serve as an obstacle, or is it something you've had to manage, or is it part of your superpower?
I'm going to say it's part of my superpower, but I do have some clients where their ADHD is not helpful. Mm-hmm. So I have to get in there and coach, guide, try to influence, persuade. So normally I think, with one of my clients, she's been a client since 2017. So She's finally been, Carrie, take the wheel, because I know that. And we started with just payroll and recruiting, and she said I can manage stuff, but she's had people challenges over the years that with her ADHD, and the way that she was running things, it was creating problems. So she enabled me to put in, I don't like structure and heavy admin things. It's business owners don't need that. You have that
Right.
in a big company. If you want that, go there. It's not for an entrepreneur. It's not for a small to mid-sized business. You have to be nimble. So
Let me ask you there, like dive into that a little bit, because that's really interesting, because I know clients who've engaged HR professionals
Mhm,
who they do come in and want things hyper structured, and
mhm,
the clients I've had, they've actually expressed frustration about that. So
mhm,
how do you ensure that there's that vigilance or consistency on the HR
mhm,
with some discipline without
mhm.
over structuring? Like that sounds like a
Yep.
pretty interesting tightrope to walk.
So, and I guess that's probably the other reason why I got into my business, is because term HR consultants, they go in, they deliver what the scope of work that you've identified for them to do, they hand you the finished product and they go away. And if you're a small to mid-sized business owner, you say, okay, well, now I got this. How do I use it? What does it look like in the business? There's no implementation. Um, there's no fine tuning on the other side of that, and there's no like, what happens if what they develop doesn't work for the business. And a business used to be able to have strategic goals every year, but the business market seems to change so much that you have to almost revisit those annual goals every quarter.
Mhm.
Are these still relevant based on the current market conditions? Do I need to adjust the sales a little bit? And so when I get into organizations, here's the things that are not negotiable the minute you have one employee. Let's put those pieces in place. What they look like, I usually like to tie to the values of the organization, and the culture. Because when we go in to take it a next step to recruiting, or we have to create an employee value proposition. So I guess everything I try to do, I really have a holistic view of the organization, and anything I put in place, I'm not a policeman, and that is not my vision of HR at all. My vision is, I imagine every company is like a race car on the racetrack. And the things that I put in place are the walls. So you're going to rub up against them sometimes, but they're there to keep everybody focused with their eyes on the road.
Right.
So, and if I even geek out on my own company name, it's Nimbus. Nimbus is an aura that surrounds an environment. And HR, in my opinion, should be the aura that surrounds the organization and protects it, but it does not get in its way. It's like a cloud. You can walk through it.
Right.
You
Nice.
know? So,
So that you jumped into a little bit of philosophy there. So
sorry.
let's actually talk. No, that's great. I love that. Let's talk about that a little bit. HR as a phrase,
Hmm.
human resources. I know some entrepreneurs and even their employees, and we've had lots of conversations about this. There's actually something they feel objectionable about that term. Like, humans aren't
100%.
resources. I often use the term with my clients, HR is human relations, not human
Hmm.
resources.
Hmm.
Um, can you just talk a little bit about that, like how people perceive that?
Yeah, I can, because even myself, if you've had a bad experience with HR in your life, you're going to hate HR. You're going to hate even saying the name. Who wouldn't? Because we've all had a bad experience with HR at some point. I have stories from my own career, where there's bad HR practitioners, which, again, is my impetus for starting my business, because I know HR could be done better. HR for me, and even if I go back to my education, my education is a degree in what's called human systems intervention. And to me, a workplace is a human system.
Mhm.
And as a practitioner, I have to make interventions to make it more effective, high performing, compliant with the law, and protected and mitigate risk. And so I'm making interventions, whether it's cultural, subcultural, recruiting, the human relations piece too, because we're at work or with our work people for however long. I don't want to say 8 hours a day, because while it is, we have more of a workflow these days than a work day. So,
Right.
yeah, so that's my philosophy slash rant on HR. But yeah, I love the idea of calling it human relations. I've also seen people call it, when I was at BlackBerry, we were organizational design business partners.
Right.
People do business partners, and I actually call myself a business partner because I'm just helping you with, and then, you also brought up the human resources. People talk about human capital,
Hmm.
right, in an organization. So,
It
I
shifts how
mean,
people think about it. And I find most entrepreneurs, they don't think that way. They look at their people as people, and they care
mhm,
about them, and they
mhm,
so let's shift a little bit to the entrepreneurs. Like, what,
sure.
they're running their businesses. What are the biggest blind spots? Like, the
Mhm,
people side of businesses is a huge source of frustration and concern for most entrepreneurs. And they usually, well, I shouldn't say usually, there's a lot of um how do I say it? There's somewhat of sometimes a negative orientation or a concern, or like those people, it's hard to find good people.
mhm.
Um, what do you think are the biggest blind spots that people have with respect to their people side of their business?
So I think the biggest blind spot I come across are entrepreneurs that say, "Oh, I can just go to Google and get a people solution.
Hmm.
I don't need HR." That's their biggest blind spot. "I don't need help. I can do this. I don't need help. I have 3 employees." And my take is, the minute you have one employee, you have a problem. Because I've seen it, and you have a problem because, do you have a contract? What's the nature of the relationship? I'll give an example. I had a client who, actually, I worked with at BlackBerry, and he was starting his own middleware software, and they built it. They were ready to go to market. He hired a sales guy. Didn't tell me until after the fact. He met the guy. Yeah, didn't tell me until after the fact, and I thought this was going to be interesting. And then when I tried to nail the sales guy down into a contract, things got a little interesting, and he was pretty squirmy. And so I did negotiating with him probably on and off for 6 weeks, and trying to get him locked down to a price. And what ended up happening was, I said, "You know what," to this guy and my client, I said, "Why don't we make a 90-day plan for you? You tell us what you think you need to do in the next 90 days." Because in his first 2 months, almost 3 months, he'd made one phone call, had one meeting, and sent one email.
Wow.
And it cost my client $18,000 to make him go away. And that $18,000 is what was going to get him to the finish line of his product and get some sales. And
Hmm.
I was absolutely heartbroken. Um, Absolutely heartbroken that this is where it ended up. And the guy that he hired, he talked a really great game. And so, he's in sales. Sales guys can talk.
Yeah.
But, when I back it up, when we look for salespeople, I actually use a personality assessment called Hukama Analytics. And I love this product so much. I have 50% of the company in Canada. So, but I love it because it's holistic. It tells me what the competencies are that a person's going to bring to the workplace. It tells me how they're going to work with others under stress and when they're happy. It gives us coaching and guidance for people leaders to, help coach them along or manage them a little bit. And it also gives me a team role report, so I know where they're going to fit into the organization. And I can also do a 360 feedback with it as well. So, if we run into some problems down the road, do a 360 as part of the annual review and see how this is going. Right. So,
Yeah.
and none of those things are punitive, by the way. They're all data points. Because
Right.
I think sometimes when we use these languages, and when HR consultants use some language, it feels punitive to the business owner. And I think that's probably like another blind spot. "Oh, I don't want to be held back. Oh, I don't need HR. I can do it myself. Oh, if I have HR, they're going to tell me all these things I can't do."
Right.
So, yeah.
Now, what do you see happening out there? Like, so we're
Mm,
recording this in July of 23. We come out of COVID, there was quiet quitting, there was the great resignation, and there's shifts
Yep.
in the labor market. And there's potentially, there's still a strong labor market, but are we on the verge of a recession? And there's high interest
Mhm.
rates and all this kind of stuff going on. What do
Mhm.
you see are the trends that are happening now in the labor market?
Um, it is not, I think that, and this is probably another blind spot for an entrepreneur too. They think that they can post a job and people will apply, and then they'll have like a whole bunch of people to choose from. It's actually, the market is flipped, and I've headhunted in my past as well. So I've seen and I've held national recruiting roles as well. So I've seen the trends. You are not giving someone a gift by giving them a job at your company. You have to sell why. What's in it for them? Why would anybody want to come and work for you? What compelling reasons do you have to join your company? And we call that an employee value proposition. And the
Mhm.
employee value proposition needs to be tied to your values, your mission, your vision. If you haven't done those things, I mean, I think you do that work too, Warren. I know I do. And but tying that to specific business goals is important, and it needs to be tied back to people. Um, Making sure that they have a specific interview process defined so that you are doing this, everybody gets the same experience. I always say, my sort of secret sauce in recruiting is anybody I speak with, I want them to walk away, even if they didn't get the job, saying, wow, was that ever an amazing experience?
Mhm.
Because they'll go tell other people that maybe will reach out to me and say, hey, so and so didn't get this job, but they told me you might be hiring for it still. Can we talk? And quite often, that's how I find the person, is a referral. I also think about the talent pool, and I think too, I call it tainting the talent pool. If people see the same job posted over and over and over again, there's something wrong with your company. It's got cooties.
Right.
So nobody will want to touch it. And then people say, oh, why can't I hire? I've had this job open for, a year. And I actually had a client where they wanted a software tester. And the software testers in the market at that time, for the skill level they wanted, were between 80 and 100K. And so I gave them candidates in that space, and they said, oh, well, I only want to pay 50K. So I went back out to market and said, here's your software testers in the 50K range. Well, I don't want that. So I'm like, well, these are your choices. This is what's going on right now. And it was really interesting. And the hiring manager was really upset. And she was really upset with me, but I'm like, I can't, this is what the story is. I can't change it. And so the role sat open for a year. And then she gave me a resume of somebody a year later and said, I want to hire this person. And I said, oh, software tester, 120K. What do you like? What's the skills? So she was like, you don't even need to say, I told you so. I get it. So, but it was interesting that it took her a year of thinking about things, and probably, suffering to a degree, because she was having to do some of the stuff herself before
Mhm.
before she realized. And we've gone back to clients to say, you are not appropriately market priced with your expectation. We need to change it, because we'll tell you. I mean, we have the compensation stuff in the background too, and surveys, so we can usually tell people what's going on. But some of the other things too, I think when people come into an organization, um, where entrepreneurs fall down is onboarding too.
Mhm.
How do you integrate that person? And the stronger your onboarding, well, we call it a program in HR speak, but the stronger your onboarding process is, the more successful that new person will be. And I really believe that, if we talk about,
You mean throwing someone into deep end and hoping they swim isn't a
yeah,
good strategy?
no, not at all. And it'll backfire, because then you're going to have turnover. And here's the thing that people don't think about. Entrepreneurs don't think about the cost of turnover. So the cost of posting the job, looking at resumes, screening the resumes, interviewing, maybe have other people in your organization interview them, make their contract, bring them on board, and start training. And the impact of other people around. If that person doesn't work out, it is 150 to 200% of their salary is the cost of turnover. So, and it's vapor. You don't see it, but then you're wondering why you have cash flows issues later, and that is precisely why. precisely why. So an onboarding program is not just day one either. It's not just filling out the forms, the tax forms, the payroll forms, your information, getting them on a computer, all of those things. It's give them a buddy. And I'm doing this with some of my clients now that have had long-term employees and they're hiring new because they don't want to change the culture. And the culture they have is actually great and strong and amazing. And so I say, okay, so let's partner an older tenured employee with a new one because they're going to help bake in the culture that you have. Because when you get a new person, if you have an organization of 10, 15, or 20 people and you bring in five new people, you're changing your culture. So, and is it for the better or worse? We don't know. It's whatever these 5 people bring in. So make sure that you pair up those people with a buddy that's been there longer that can help them. Well, this is why we do things the way we are. Here's the history of how we got here, because they don't have that. And in humans, in the absence of information, we make up our own.
That's right.
We fill in our own stories. So let's help them.
Nature abhors a vacuum, so we fill it in.
Yeah. So let's give them a buddy and help bake in the culture. When I think about organizations I've been with, BlackBerry was the best at onboarding and culture. Absolutely the best. They gave you the biggest jug of Kool-Aid and everybody drank it and we were all on the same vibe and it was amazing to go from.
What about it was amazing? Like, what was the thing? How can a small business owner learn from that? What could they implement themselves?
So making sure they have a buddy, making sure that from my own experience, when I sat down at my desk at my first day, my laptop was there, everything was all set up, my calendar was open, and I had 2 weeks full of appointments and meetings. And it was with different HR business partners. It was with our health and safety person, our disability management person, our recruiting team. I had meetings with everybody I needed to know to do my job effectively. And they also made up a bingo card. And so I had to have, when I looked at it, I'm like, because I'm not like some people in HR, I call them cake bakers, right? They bring the birthday cakes all the time. That is not me. I'm not that person. And so when I saw this, I thought, oh, what is this? But when I took it with me to the meetings, because I'm a conscientious employee, I said, I have this bingo card I don't even know. And they said, well, we're going to just, get to know each other, like authentically. And maybe you'll find out some of the pieces on your bingo card. And it was like, someone played a violin and, in an orchestra. And so it really enabled me to quickly get to know people and get over the hump. Because I also think, when I go into human systems, and the human system of a workplace, we talk about, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. But inclusion is key, regardless of how anybody identifies, if they're neurodiverse, whatever. I take that out of the mix. I do care, but when you feel included as a human being, we are community-based beings. We are meant to live with other people. We are meant to interact and be in a group and in a community with other people. And so when we feel included, we can be our best. When we don't feel included, that's where mistrust comes in, right? And change happens at the speed of trust. So if we don't trust our workplace, or we don't trust people in our workplace, we're not going to do our best work. And we're not going to be performing at our best. And again, that goes to a company's bottom line. You want everybody doing their best. Sometimes life gets in the way too. Absolutely.
One of the questions I had for you when people hear HR, they immediately go to compensation as one of the big things.
Yep.
During that whole quiet quitting and great resignation stuff, there was a bunch of stuff in the media that was all around, well, people are looking and going to places where they can get paid more money. But the studies that I saw by McKinsey and Gallup and others, it was sort of like, well, no, it's actually around what you talked about, inclusion and belonging and relationship. But then in real terms for a small business, I've heard stories, somebody's left because they're getting $5 an hour or $2 an hour somewhere else. What do you see as the balance between compensation and those
Hmm.
other drivers in really practical terms? Because sometimes that, the studies that say, oh, compensation doesn't matter, that seems to bump up against the reality that entrepreneurs hear. So how do you think about that?
So I truly believe that when there is a value to what a person does in a specific function, you can go to Glassdoor and Indeed to see what that value is, right? Because people have their compensation posted. When you when you have appropriately market priced and you are paying fair market value for someone, they're not going to come to you and say I need more money unless the other components, right? The employee value proposition components, the culture, the trust, the respect. People want feedback too. Sometimes entrepreneurs, and that's another blind spot. Sometimes entrepreneurs don't think, oh, I don't need to do an annual review. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. It doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be some big, huge, heavy administrative process. I say have at least a monthly meeting with every employee. Did good, do different. Make notes. What do you need from me? What do you need from the organization? Are we letting you down anywhere? Is the job we hired you to do what you're actually doing? Are you getting what you need out of everybody here? Fix it, make notes at the end of the year. Hey, here's our review. These are all the things we talked about this year, you know, and maybe invite the employee to tell you what your organization could do different from their opinion.
I love what you just said, because when people hear feedback, they always think it's just the boss giving feedback to the employee. But if
Hmm.
you do embrace HR as human relations as opposed to just human resources, a relationship is a two-way dynamic. And
Yes,
that feedback conversation is a two-way conversation. And the more that you can facilitate that, the
hmm,
more you can make that relationship authentic so that people don't want to leave because they do feel
100%.
included and heard.
And I think too, that's a mistake that some entrepreneurs make also is that, oh, I need to give this person a discussion because they're not meeting my needs. Well, why aren't they meeting your needs? Were you clear about your expectations? What are you doing to support them? Do they have all the tools they need to do the job? I often will go in to put someone on a performance improvement plan because I like doing that as a step before termination because if an employee, this is my technical HR speak, if an employee sucks, then they need to know that they suck before you fire them. So they have a chance to fix themselves if they so choose. However, 65% of the time, an employee goes on a performance improvement plan, they change and they turn into a really good employee.
Mm.
And the common denominator there is expectations have been clarified. And then everybody's clear about what the expectation is. And so half the time the employee they're not getting the right communication, they're not getting the right tools, and they don't have the right expectations around what they're doing. So sometimes I've seen managers, and I say managers, people leaders, business owners, whatever, have a huge aha moment. Oh my God, I am so sorry I did that to you. Let me hire another person in this area. Let me take that piece off your plate. Let's give that to Bob because Bob should be doing that in the first place and he just doesn't know. You know, those are the kind of things that we go in and do.
So last question on sort of the entrepreneurs. What do you see?
Okay.
What's the difference between the entrepreneurs who are great at working with their people and building their people and those who really struggle? Because you like the way you just framed it, it ultimately is personal responsibility for the entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
What can they like? What did they? Who are the ones who really get it and those that don't? What's the difference in that?
The ones that get it are the ones that know. I, One of my business taglines is if you don't know what you don't know, how are you supposed to know? You know? That's literally what we say because an entrepreneur, a small business owner, sometimes mid-sized, they don't know what they don't know. And
Yep.
so you need to call in the experts and you need to be humble enough to know or self-aware enough to say, hey, I don't know how to run people. Yeah, I managed people at Bank of Montreal 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Your Bank of Montreal 10 people team is not the same as your business. It's totally different skill set, totally different set of expectations, and a totally different way of working. Um, because at a bank you have time to like sit around and talk for a couple hours, but at your business those 2 hours need to be 10 minutes. Right? So I think I think that's a blind spot, is that the entrepreneur needs to know where their blind spot is, and admit that they need the help. And from my own example, the first partner I went after was an accountant. I wanted a finance. My first hire was, I needed a financial partner. I needed a CFO for my business. So who was going to be my CFO? Because I'll go get the money, but you need to tell me how we're going to manage it and budget me.
Nice.
So, because otherwise I'll be like, hey, let's get all this cool stuff that we don't need. I think, one of the other things that I've seen too is, there's always cool new software. And as a business owner, you're like, oh yeah, I think I want that. It's going to make things so much more helpful. And it's going to be so easy. But I've gone into businesses where they have the software, whatever they think it is, and they're spending all their time feeding the software, and it's not helping them. Because I think for a lot of the time, small to mid-sized business owners, there's not a lot of software that you actually need. There's not a lot of software and tools that you actually need, unless it's like business specific.
Yeah, sort of reliance on technology.
Yeah, for sure.
So listen, I could talk to you for hours. We haven't even covered, remote working and KPIs.
Oh my gosh.
All kinds of stuff. But I'm sensitive to your time. You've been really generous with your expertise and your time. Just two last things more about you. I always think it's great to get lessons from other entrepreneurs. And about the things that have produced those outcomes for them. So I always ask two questions that I always think are super interesting. What's one personal quality that you most had to improve or overcome to make your business a success?
I think for me, having ADHD was focus. Because having ADHD at BlackBerry served me so well, because it was a fire hose and everything was coming at me at the same time. And when you have ADHD and you have 400 things coming at you, I could just rapid fire handle all those things. But, when I sat down at my, Nimbus day one, and I'm like, okay, what are we gonna, what's going on? What are we gonna do? I needed to have focus and focus. So structuring my day so that I have focus. And then I actually went and got the diagnosis and got some medication. And that was profoundly helpful for me. But I also have people in place to help me stay focused too.
Nice. And what's, no false humility. I actually find this question, people have a harder time than the, thing they had to improve. What's the one personal quality that most contributed to your success?
I think probably my my leap of faith. I call it my leap of faith syndrome. I can do it. Let's go. Or it's actually called unconscious incompetence. I don't know what I don't know. Right. So
or unconscious competence. Maybe you're just naturally good.
And then actually you move through to a state of conscious competence, right? And unconscious competence is the other end of that spectrum. So
there's there's also within that. I love that your phrase is the leap of faith, but there is something around confidence, not necessarily confidence in your technical skill, but confidence in your ability to figure it out. Like everything is figure outable. And having that confidence to just say, I don't know what I'm going to face, but I'm pretty sure that I can deal with it, is just a great quality that allows you to move into those unknown spaces.
I think too, knowing, I heard us saying a number of years ago, and it was fail forward faster. And it might have actually been from Chris Hadfield, because astronauts go, hang out for 18 months before their space mission and fail. They go through every single failure, because when they get into space, if they were practicing all their success, they're never going to learn anything. And success isn't what's going to save them in space. It's going to be, success at solving the failure. And so coming up with so being open to failing, because, when kids fail, we're saying, oh, they're learning. What's the difference if we're an adult? We're still learning, right? And some of my failures in my organization have been, in my own company, have been fantastic learning. Am I going to make the same mistake again? Nope. No, I won't.
That's right. Well, listen,
So
thank you so much for taking the time to do this. You shared a lot of wisdom. I hope people really took away some great insights about how to manage their people better, because there was some gold in what you shared. How can people find you or get a hold of you?
I'm at www.nimbushrsolutions.com.
And
We're
Nimbus is
also
spelled?
N as in Nancy, IMBUS, HRsolutions.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google,
Not on Threads yet?
on the intranets. No, do I need to go over there too?
I don't know. It's the new kid on the block.
All right, we'll try it. Alignable. We're on all the things. And if I'm not there yet, I'll find somebody to help me get over there.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
And see you next time on Business That Matters Spotlight.